for many, many years, Nike and many other organizations let the sweatshops in Bangladesh continue until somebody cracked down on them. Now, what their argument would have been that there was no law. In fact, Bangladesh would rather have more people work for
Right.
16 hours because their per capita income is low. But there's still the moral responsibility of these organizations to do the right thing again, instead of waiting for somebody to call them out and then say, okay, we're sorry, we won't do this again.
I mean, they did wait for companies for activists to call them out before doing something.
Yeah.
But I think kind of maybe the bigger and more interesting story here is, right, in the 90s, in the 80s and the 90s, companies like Nike and the Gap and so on went to Bangladesh because labor is cheaper, because there's weaker governance, there's weaker enforcement of laws, so you can get cheaper workers and you don't have the same level of legal oversight that you have at home. So part of the story, I think, of the rise of responsible business is companies globalizing, partly so they can avoid national laws. So I get really irritated. There are lots of people who kind of have popped up in 2020 kind of being like, ESG doesn't work, voluntary responsibility doesn't work, we need regulation. And it's kind of like, well, if regulation was helpful, we wouldn't have this problem in the first place. The entire reason we have this problem is companies going to countries where they feel they can exploit the workforce and where there's low governance capacity so they can make more money. So to pop up and say we just need more laws is really simplistic. We need to think about how we're going to move the business community globally to behaving better, and so we don't have issues like Rana Plaza happening again.
Right.
But at the same time, it's really complicated. You can go and pay your factory workers in Bangladesh enormous amounts of money. Something I've heard is then maybe you don't have any teachers in Bangladesh because it's more lucrative to be a factory worker. So I think, again, we've got to be really careful not to oversimplify this and say it's just about doing the right thing. It's very complicated if we start to think about what is the responsibility of a company like Nike over its whole value chain? Where should it focus? It can, it's easy enough to pop up and say no child labor in this factory. Much harder to think about what you would like your workers to do with their children. Are you going to provide education? Are you going to provide nursery facilities? Then what is your impact on the country more broadly? So again, I think let's not fool ourselves. These questions are easy.
Yes. And you said just do the right thing in your own words. When people say that, just, what do you mean just? It's difficult. It's like, I just want to be happy. What do you mean you just want to be happy? It's the most difficult thing on earth.
Exactly.